Delighted on this episode to be talking with author Andrew Robertson. Andrew's the author of Inhumanities and Dearly Departed. So, we're talking about the spooky things, the horror things, just in time for the Halloween season. Andrew, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Jason. This is awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, Glad to be chatting, and I'm curious, by means of an origins question, what led you to the written word?
When I was a kid, I was hugely into spooky things. I mean, part of it is my birthday's in October, so you're excited around the time of your birthday, and everything got kind of a little bit spookier around my birthday. Um, so I kind of always had those two things in my mind, like it's your birthday and everything's spooky, and Halloween's coming up, and I love dressing up, and that extended to the sort of media that I was consuming. So when I was a kid, I was actually late for grade one once because I was watching Hilarious House of Frightenstein, which is it's about 180 episodes that were filmed in a really short period of time in Hamilton, Ontario, with Billy Van and Mitch Markowitz and Vincent Price, and just like a spooky haunted house children's show. It's a real bizarre little thing that we hold very dear to our hearts here in Canada for sure. And then at the library, they had a great kids section of spooky stuff, like obviously Grimm's fairy tales. And there was this one book that I've been trying ever since to refine, and it's called something like 101 Ghost Stories, Spooky Things, and other stuff that goes bump in the night. I remember the cover, I just can't find it. And I was obsessed with that book. I would take it out all the time, and I just loved the idea of scaring people, and I love the idea of being scared. And I mean that evolved over time because I do primarily sort of body horror. Um, but I guess those Grimm's fairy tales about the woman with the golden arm and her husband digs her up and hacks off the arm and steals it. Maybe that was my early introduction to body horror. But also as a kid of the 80s, I mean, we had Alice Cooper, we had Vincent Price, we had Elvira. Like these were popular icons that you would see everywhere. And it was all sort of around Halloween, and they were all so individualistic that I just kind of became obsessed with the scare.
Nice, nice. It sounds like there are lots of inspirations there, lots of creative sparks. As you've been writing, how has your process grown with you? How has that changed?
When I was younger, I've got props. I was obsessed with the
Nice.
X-Men. I've got a storm tattoo. And
Mm,
I like growing up as a queer kid in the 80s, obviously you were faced with a lot of negative commentary, a lot of stigma, like you're queer, you're getting AIDS, you're dying, you deserve it kind of a thing. And X-Men really um, presented this idea that a group of people that were different could actually be good for society, but they were shunned. And you look at things like the Holocaust and the AIDS epidemic and these brutal historical things where groups of people were stigmatized and shunned and injured or killed uh, just because of who they were. So when I started, I was really working a lot on mutations, like people who were mutated. This is before I read the chrysalids as well, and I was like, oh, that's spot on to me. Um, so a lot of it was about that. It was like people being mutated against their will and being shunned by
mm.
society and being threatened by society, um, because I love the comics. But then it slid more into the horror camp as I grew older and started reading more genre. And also
Mhm.
realizing how much horror is literally in the everyday. So I do try and bridge a gap between politics, capitalism, patriarchy, abuses of power, and horror as a running theme in the work that I do. But it all kind of like the writing started with Mutations and X Men. Who doesn't love the X Men?
Nice, nice, nice connection to the comics behind me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I often think of, science fiction as kind of a a vehicle, a way of talking about society. But I love that idea of horror is also a way of doing that because I think science fiction and horror are not completely separate. So I'm just curious what horror allows you to do, and how you have kind of found your creative niche in the genre.
It's a big question, right? Because, well, I mean, some purists are very like there's sci-fi and there's horror, and sci-fi is green and horror is red, for example. Because when I when I published the first book by the Great Lakes Horror Company, this is the cover, and I was told by multiple people that green is for sci-fi, and I was like, oh fuck, whatever. No, this is green because it looks cool, and it's there's a lot of science in all fiction. There's a lot of horror in all fiction. Um, as so, I mean, I mentioned earlier growing up in the 80s and the whole idea of a plague affecting a large group of people. And I would tend to dwell on that a lot. And I've spoken to other horror writers, especially ones that are into body horror, that any new spot, any new scratch on your skin, is the beginning of a total nightmare. And so you start envisioning, where is this going to go? What's wrong with me? And I think it allows me to explore sort of a panic disorder of existential crisis.
Hmm. Hmm.
All the sort of anxieties that we have in a really sort of fluid way. And I tend not to touch on the supernatural that much, or at least until recently when I have started to. I guess maybe I might be lying about that. I guess I'm sort of back and forth, but I'm really interested in human monsters, and sort of every day. So the damage that people can do when they're given too much power and it's unchecked, and the structures of society that are inherently flawed, and they're racist, they're homophobic, they're transphobic, they're misogynistic, they're misandrist in many areas. um, it allows me to explore that in a lot of ways. And I'm not necessarily into the sort of revenge writing where people are like, I'm mad about this. And so all these stories are about bullies that get screwed up, and they get what's coming to them. Um, I tend to not believe in happy endings or providing people with a hero. I tend to stick more to exploring in a really transparent and sort of raw way what people can really be like when you don't edit your voice as a writer to let the true villain come through. And it's been kind of scary with releasing Inhumanities. Um, like there's a lot of shitty people in this book. They're all shitty. There's a lot of villains, and there's really no happy endings in here. And that was by design because society isn't built to provide most of us a happy ending. It's built for us to work and support someone else's success. You look at a lot of politicians, there's a huge field of people behind them that are fundraising, that are creating key messages and trying to figure out their own algorithm of how can I keep this person at the forefront and how can I keep people from seeing what's behind the curtain. And within humanities, I just decided to go right behind the curtain, and I didn't go back and edit out what I thought was too much. I just thought, well, let's see what people think.
Nice,
It was
nice.
spooky.
Yeah, that's a cool idea to go into as a writer, and it might answer my next question, at least in part, which is where would you like to go next in your writing? Is that something you would like to continue to explore, or are you thinking about other possibilities?
um, in the in the immediate future, what I'm working on right now, some of the voice may be the same as what came out of Inhumanities, but I'm working on it. Might be a novella, it might be a novel. I'm not sure yet. About a queer serial killer that one day is looking at his hands and realizes how aged they look, and it sends him on this spiral about his age and how that's going to affect his ability to be a productive serial killer. And he's a crap person. He's got a lot of bad thoughts about everybody. But his main concern is how do I continue doing what I love when I'm surrounded by just disgusting people? And The catalyst for it was the main character in this Martin Amis book, Money. This guy just sucked and he was kind of gormless, but I like that unreliable narrator, and Gillian Flynn does it as well, really, really well. This unreliable narrator where you're not sure where their ego and their gormless cluelessness about society and how rank they are ends, and where the real world begins. So perception is mired in their vanity or their conceit. So I
Mm,
just wanted to explore that a bit more. And then I've got a 70s sci fi environmental horror that my friend Sephra wants me to finish. I will eventually. And then a book that I started a long time ago and then got into writing a bunch of other things. But it's about a club kid death cult where they think that they can be environmental saviors by creating a mass suicide movement. So a couple of different things in there. I guess a lot of trigger warnings too.
yeah. Uh, well, if I'm a listener and I want to find out more about your work, any particular places that I should go, websites, conventions, or anything of that nature that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Instagram at Andrew Awesome 76 or Great Lakes Horror Company, which is a cooperative press that supports diverse voices. That's GL Horror Company, both on Instagram. Um, and my books, you can find them at Little Ghosts Books in Toronto, who are definitely an inspiration to all of us in Toronto with what they've done and supporting the community with an all horror, queer run press and bookshop. Raven's End's books in Winnipeg on the Big Bad Zon. You can find stuff there as well. And that's sort of the extent of where you can find me right now.